Hi, I'm Carolyn Cross, Curator of Collections at the Oakville Museum, and we are all ready for the holidays in that we've decorated all our historic rooms in period decorations and bringing the holidays and the history and traditions of the past to Ercles Estate here in Oakville. Right here, we are actually standing in what we call the Victorian room, and we have a typical Victorian tree here on our customs cupboard. We all love decorating Christmas trees as a time-honored tradition. And the Christmas trees really date back to the 15th century when evergreens were used in church plays. And it wasn't really until Victorian era when Queen Victoria married a German-born husband, Prince Albert, and he brought a lot of German traditions to Britain, and the popularity just took off and came across to North America as well. So here we see a typical tree which would have been lit by candles, and it was said that for about a 12-foot tree, they would recommend 400 candles. So there are so many manufacturers that tried different ways to make candles, whether or not they would have candles that would wrap around branches. Here we see on our tree an invention that little tin cups that would catch the drips from the wax, because many a tree were set on a blaze during the holiday season with the lit candles. Not exactly very safe way of lighting your tree. Most of the decorations would have been handmade. Things such as nuts, cookies, cornucopias filled with bonbons and treats would have been put on trees. Flags, handmade. You see we have some handmade fans made out of paper. These were all the types of ornaments that would be traditionally put onto a Victorian tree. And at the beginning, trees were smaller. They would usually be tabletop trees, such as this example we have here. It's later on, and particularly in North America, where there is an abundance of large trees, that we started seeing them more put on the floor. And here in Canada, actually, the first record we have of a tree being talked about, a Christmas tree being decorated, was in 1854 in Hamilton, Ontario. You'll see here in the Victorian room that we have boughs and swags all over the room, on the sconces, over the entranceway, on the mantels, and that's because evergreens symbolized hope and renewed growth during the depths of winter. So people were looking to nature to bring it in the house and to get them through the long, dark months. So Victorians really carried this practice to excess by decorating with swags of cedar, rope, ivy, and any other evergreen they could bring from the exterior to the interior. So this, they would swag them across ceilings, church pulpits. They would actually have greenery everywhere inside the home. So we've tried to incorporate that throughout the room here. Even on top of the grandfather clock, we have some berries and pine cones, and these are the types of things that people would bring in to decorate their homes. Here we are in the Edwardian room, and we have a large lit Christmas tree here, which is very different, not only in the types of decorations on the tree, but the fact that it is no longer lit by candles. And this is something that happened in the late 19th century, but did not become popularized until really 1925. As we saw with the Victorian tree, tiny candles would be the light source on those trees. The wax candles really was a dangerous tradition, though, that caused so many house fires every season. But in 1882, Edward Johnson, a VP for Thomas Edison, came up with the idea of putting a string of 80 twinkly electric lights. They were colored red, white, and blue with crepe paper. And he had these on his own Christmas tree on Fifth Avenue in New York City. As soon as people saw this, his electric lights attracted media attention and became a sensation amongst the more wealthy. It's not something that everybody could afford. A string of those lights would have cost $12, which would be the equivalent probably of an entire week's wage for the average person at the time. It wasn't then until 1901 that the first commercially available light sets were offered, but mainly for businesses that wanted to attract attention to their storefront windows. And then a few years later, in 1903, is when we see the first sets of pre-wired lights that were intended for Christmas trees that were offered to the general public. So really, the Edwardian tree here at Ercles very likely would have had Christmas lights, in the early 20th century. And by 1917, many companies were offering electric Christmas lights, but they really, really became mass-produced and very, very popular in about 1925. And then after that time period, really, it was the incandescent light bulb. So it's only in very, very recent years that we've switched over to LEDs that we see a real big jump in technology with Christmas lights. So here, we also on this tree, the decorations are very different. So we've gone from having a lot of the homemade decorations that we had on the Victorian tree made out of paper and nuts and edibles and such to a lot of glass ornaments, things that sparkle and metals as well. And something happened in 1880, and it was an event that really dramatically changed the North American Christmas tree decorating market. And it's when F.W. Woolworth purchased $25 worth of blown glass ornaments from a German importer, which to his surprise sold within 2 days. They were so popular because Germany had such a tradition of glass blowing, and they had been manufacturing glass Christmas tree ornaments for several years, but they weren't really being sold or imported to the US or Canada. So it really, from then, it took off, and you see all kinds of intricate designs. So even toys, I mean, people did not get the gifts of excess that we see today in the 21st or even the 20th century. Most gifts were placed on the tree or under the tree, either unwrapped or simply wrapped in brown paper. So very different from what we see today. I mean, paper was invented in China, and the process was sacred and closely guarded. But wrapping Christmas presents only became popular after the Victorian era. And even then, only very affluent and wealthy people could afford these elaborate wrapping papers, these printed papers with accompanying ribbons and lace. But really, for most people, they're plainly covered in the brown paper. But in 1890s, the technology for mass producing decorated foldable paper came about, and that's when it became more affordable to the general public. So we're talking about the turn of the 20th century. And at that time, the Hall brothers, the founders of Hallmark, offered basic red, green, and white tissue paper for gift wrapping. And in 1917, Raleigh Hall used decorated envelope liners in a display and sold them for 10 cents a sheet. And they soon sold out, and a new industry was born. And that's where we see all the decorative wrapping papers that adorn all of our presents today. So here we have some Christmas crackers on our bridge table. And Christmas crackers were invented in 1846. And basically, it was a London sweet maker named Tom Smith who was inspired by Parisian bonbons. He thought it would be fun if his sweets and little toys that he made as well could be wrapped and opened the same way as some of the fancy wrappers he saw in Paris. And what he did is he wrapped them the same way, and when you pull it in half, he added a snap. He got that idea supposedly when he was listening to, he was sitting in front of the fire and heard his Yule log popping. And so he came up with the idea that when you pull this with his little candies inside, that it would make a popping sound. And so hence the Christmas cracker. And slowly he also started adding little love sayings in there, little sayings of love and little poems. And so today it's evolved to where you get the crown, you get a little toy, and you usually get some kind of joke or funny little sentiment on a card written inside as well. So we talked a little bit about how Victorians were bringing a lot of greenery in. Another thing, for example, people couldn't have a big tree. They would bring boughs in, or something that became really popular was mistletoe, and something that came to be known as the kissing ball. So mistletoe, in essence, is a parasitic plant that grows off of another tree, most often an oak tree. And it's believed that mistletoe holds magical powers from the soul of the mighty oak trees. So it grants strength, peace, health, fertility, and love to those who kiss beneath it. So it became this really lovely symbol of hope and wellness, and people welcomed it into their home. And oftentimes they would decorate the kissing ball as well with acorns and ribbons and make them quite spectacular. So another interesting Christmas tradition that we have on display here at Oakville is a bride's tree. We have it in a more modern display, so you can really see the ornaments. And what a bride's tree is, it was a German tradition again, and they believe that a married couple, specifically their first year of marriage, this would be given as a gift, that tree needed to have 12 specific ornaments for happiness in their life journey together. So we see here each ornament, every 12 of them, means something very specific. So we have the fish, the purple fish there, which is a symbol of fertility. We have a rose down at the bottom, which symbolizes affection. A teapot, second row, that is a symbol of hospitality. The bird at the very bottom is for joy and happiness. We'd often have an angel or a church, and that would be for God's guidance. A house is for protection or family shelter. Santa would symbolize goodwill, giving, and sharing. A fruit basket for generosity and plenty. A rabbit for hope and peace with nature. A heart is true love and love in the home. Pine cone right at top is for fruitfulness, eternity, and motherhood. And then the last one is a flower basket, which is good wishes or beauty in the home. And a lot of these ornaments are still made today. These symbols we still see in ornaments sold in stores. And it's funny, we were just putting up our tree, and one of our staff members said, "Hey, my grandmother has all of these ornaments, and I wonder if she was given them as gifts for a bride's tree."